do we even begin to start understanding, these severings that we've had or experienced over the last few years? And, man, where do we even begin? For me, the severing is very multi-dimensional. It's very complex, because when we think of the severing, we're thinking of the self. That's with capital S, the higher self. We're thinking of relationships, outdated beliefs. And so you start to see how religious trauma for me seeps in. And over the last few years, we've been severing ties with religious beliefs, religious practices, as well as, unfortunately, people that are still religious. And so, religion is very important for people, we will say. You can't really get rid of it. Something will always take the place of religion and become religious, So the thing about it for me is these severings we've learned are necessary. They're part of like the grand scheme of it all, the bigger process. And so for me, we've learned that, we have to accept certain severings because people also reveal themselves. Like, people tell on themselves all the time. But when you have like those first few moments with new people, it's like first love, it's like being high on a drug, and you don't really focus on the flaws or the signs that are like blatantly in front of you. You're like, it's not that bad, and what we're willing to deal with versus what we're believing, and we've come to a point now where we don't want to, do that anymore like that. We've learned, in a way, from these experiences. And so the severing is deep. For me, it pushed me into a more spiritual path. And then with that, I couldn't just be by myself. I'm with a family, and I have you. And it's like I'm being pushed to these spiritual spaces because of my religious trauma. But how do I also bring my family with me wherever I'm going, and balancing, spirituality, one's own spirituality, and having a family is a very complex thing. This is not like some microwavable, just add water type thing. Like, this is very complex. It requires time, energy, patience, and even, suffering. And so, for me, a person who's always thinking objectively for most parts, in large perspective, severings pull me into the everyday, the mundane, like when we sever a relationship with a friend, that pulls me from this cosmic perspective down to this earthly, everyday perspective. And it hurts on that level very intimately. It's hard for me to then return back to this cosmic perspective when we feel these emotions, we feel this suffering because we're connected or attached to these things. We were maybe even in love with these things, whether ideas, people, habits, and so, severing is necessary, but it's painful. And for me, it's been really challenging knowing that it's going to be painful, but holding true to it. Me creating boundaries has somehow caused severings with people, even ideas. And so now my boundaries are being questioned, they're being challenged. And we find ourselves like even questioning ourselves. Should we, take down this boundary or should we hold the boundary, And it's hard. It's not easy. Of course, it may seem like the easy choice is to hold your boundary, but to hold the line and hold the boundary when no one else is there, that takes a great deal of integrity. And if you are a person who lacks integrity, this is even 10 times more challenging.
Oh, yeah.
So a person like me who believes they possess integrity, it's still challenging, because my heart, it pulls at me, and it's like always asking myself, Aaron, are you being fair? Are you being loving? Are you being compassionate, considerate? Are you empathizing? And because we're going through these processes, holding boundaries sometimes is really, really, draining and exhausting, right?
Yeah. I can definitely resonate with that. I mean, you've seen me just going back and forth with having to uphold boundaries, but then taking them down because of the idea of, well, I want to be a good person. And so me putting up those boundaries making me look like I'm an asshole and I'm selfish. But it's just not that, like, it's really not like that black and white kind of thing. Like, there's definitely a gray area between that, because it's almost like a balance. You cannot just be someone that just holds boundaries like to the extent where you have no human connection or anything like that. Obviously, that's destructive. But having to see and experience, and then also being reminded again of how our kindness should not be taken as our weakness, and being reminded about that, and having to think about old memories, older events where things did happen and we've made like certain choices where we didn't think about or put ourselves, I would say, first, but meaning like putting yourself first where you're not hurting your mental health. So you're thinking about how would this interaction, I guess, make me feel, like what would be a reaction to that? Not a trigger, but more of what is the purpose of this here? You know what I mean? Like, are we just doing this because everyone else is doing it kind of thing, or you're feeling forced to do something that you kind of don't want to do? Like, if you don't feel connected, you're not connected. And especially if you're coming together, and the most complex thing in the world is coming together as people and having to establish boundaries for the sake of yourself, your mind, but then also your heart. Like, to then have to try to explain that to people, people get offended by even the smallest thing. So even when we say, oh, I know this person, this is my friend, my BFF, or whatever, all relationships are different. I'm not saying that that's for everyone. But from my observation, we don't truly know everyone that way. Especially we don't get to see people often. And there's just so many gaps, things that are happening. And then maybe they're not being genuine, right? That maybe they're just showing us just small little aspects of them. But then if they are going through something, whatever it is, it's like we feel the absence. Then it's like, but that's not who we are. You know, like we don't just come together just to be high on just laughing and sharing all these awesome news and things like that. Like
Or
that's
even ideas, people coming together to get high off of ideas and beliefs, thinking that they're better than other people and stuff like that. Yeah, you're right. That all that really does lead to the severing, severing ties with people as well as ideas. And it's a lot of times we don't want to feel the suffering. We don't want to feel the pain from it, so we just put up with the bullshit instead of letting the severing take place. Letting that natural what's the word we were using? Decoupling. Like when you decouple from something, it's not a force. It's not a violent force. It's a mutual agreement. It's all right. You let go, I let go. But how many of us are still holding on to something that has already let go of us?
Yeah.
Like that, and that's a terrible feeling. No,
it is.
Sometimes it's embarrassing. Sometimes it's just guilt, right? Shame. That holds us. But this thing has already let go of us. Why haven't we moved on? Why haven't we let it go?
And what's interesting about that? Okay, so when we talk about thoughts versus like an actual relationship, is it really a relationship, or is that just like a mere interaction? Because for me, I would say I know this might sound like harsh, but I think I've always been yearning like some kind of connection in relationships, right? And so not receiving that in a sense, it kind of, it almost made me feel like, am I holding all these expectations of people to be like on my level? Are there any damn levels kind of thing? Like, are there any real levels? I don't think there are levels, but there is a sense of maturity and also accountability. So when people are trying to, I guess, block these things, it's kind of hard to kind of build these relationships. Then it just feels like a customary kind of thing, an obligation. And what's interesting is that I don't think we have been given like the proper tools, really, to sort of know how to navigate like friendships, family, and things like that. It's interesting because you and me, we are in a relationship, partnership. But we have a mutual understanding about ourselves, how we see each other. But I guess when it comes to like the exterior world, we're not there yet,
Or maybe the question is, to what extent should we be there? Because then it goes back to that whole principle or idea from the very start of this relationship, which was, we both agreed that we don't want conformity.
No.
So, like, how much do you actually project onto the exterior or the outer world or the appearance of the relationship without applying conformity? You know, what does a real naked journey look like, right? That's the ongoing quest, the ongoing challenge, question, inquiry, you know, even throughout this podcast is, you know, what does a naked journey look like? What does a naked journey look like between two people? You know, like that's a tough one. That's
Yeah.
hard because there's a very thin line, you know, where it can easily be broken or crossed, and you now invite conformity into your relationship, and it starts looking like, you know, name brand things, and then you're in trouble. Because once you allow these name brand things to come into your relationship, you're like I don't know, like a racing car renting your space to any, you know, or all highest bidders, you know, and you have all these ideas that have more input and control in your relationship than the two people who are in the relationship. You know what I mean? Like, that's when you know you've been infiltrated and infested and you're not in control. You know, it's because of this conformity. You know, it lets in all these things, and then we give our power to these things. And that is why, you know, over the last 7 years, we've slowly severed from these name brand ideas in terms of relationships, what a relationship should look like, what should the man do, what should the woman do, what's the do's and don'ts, what's the proper way to do something, like. And then we started noticing that we had to decolonize ourselves because we are in a environment that is heavily colonized. And so we have that aspect, we have gender shit that we've been shedding and trying to like understand better for ourselves, all these things at the and then still at this part, this is usually, or maybe like a few years ago, was the point in which people that are used to conformity, that's where they exit.
Yes. You mentioned that. And we started to see that. I think when you and me created a space and it just allowed people to come in and just feel, I guess, entertained or alive, whatever. Then when we began to continue our journey, and this is just as individuals, and we're questioning conformity, traditions, things that we see in our cultures and throughout history, things that we know about, but we still see that is happening, is very prevalent, you know. And once we started to do that, like that was the focus is shifted, I guess you can say, for people, where it's like, oh, they're getting a little too serious. Like, I don't think this is what we expected. The questioning of conformity was the first step into the boundaries that we then created. And it's almost like if someone has a community or something, and maybe they have like, these are certain guidelines, you know, we respect each other, or this, and that. People don't want to hear those things. They just want to come in, take what they need, you know, fill their bellies, and they're gone. You know, maybe share some laughs and they're gone. And once we started to do that, like, we started to see, like, people just started to disappear, you know, and that was very hurtful, especially when dealing with abandonment issues and things like that. And so once you start feeling that so often, you then feel like you can't trust anymore, in a way. Like I can't allow anything, maybe not even thoughts, these ideas, whatever, not even come in to kind of infiltrate and kind of just spread this disease and cause everything to just fall down and, just take over. And so, I don't know, seeing that, experiencing that over the last few years, it really has been, traumatizing to the point where I allowed that to just seep into what I was becoming. And I started to question maybe like everything that I was creating and things like that. But obviously I know that those things also have to do with something that happened way before these events. And but they still connect with one another. That's the whole thing. Like they all connect. And that's why when the abandonment, that feeling, is there, it just feels so raw. When it feels so raw, like it hurts. And so you need space because of that. You need room to kind of like let yourself take time for you and kind of rediscover yourself again. I mean, that's what happened for me. But for you, I know that might have been different, obviously. But I know we're talking a lot about people, but even with ideas, the ideas come from people. So what's interesting is that we tried to, I guess, hold a space for the person along with whatever ideas they had, like their own beliefs, right? But that was very challenging because, for example, if you have a sibling, you feel like I'm connected to this person by blood. But then here are these ideas. These are their core beliefs of life. This is how they're projecting to the outer world. I'm in the outer world. And so do I stay just because we're connected by blood? And then continue to kind of get, I'll use the word like abused, continue to stay for that. And things just don't change. Like, that's hurtful.
Yeah.
So I know that for me, it has been that way. Like, just cutting ties with people, even though I really wanted to build on relationship. But it's like this, there had to be like this unveiling. But for most of us, that aspect is very frightening. And so people feel comfortable just remaining in those places.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so theopoetic how the severing brings suffering and heartache. It brings even remembrance of dark things, things we've been avoiding. But at the same time, the severing also brings balance and stability, right? And when we start to accept these natural severings between ideas and people and things, because we're evolving or we're becoming who we are, our true selves, you start to see like the severing is just part of that process, you know. In seminary, they refer to this as eschatology, you know, the study of an end of time, a period of time. And so the severing is that it's an end of a period of time, if you think about it. whether it's a relationship or beliefs. There was a period of time from point here to point here that you believed in this, you were in connection with this person, but now that time period is done, right? And then you start a new time period, a new period, a new time, a new space, a new movement forward, a new season, you know? So it's just interesting how, you know, people that are trying to walk this naked journey, they eventually see that the severing is crucial because we have to learn to let go. We have to learn to allow people to be who they want to be. If you want to be an asshole, if you want to be immature, if you want to be a manipulator, if you want to be an abuser, guess what? That is your choice. And no one can take that away from you, right? And so if we cannot take that choice from you, we have to allow you and accept your choice. And if that's your choice, then there is a natural severing that will take place because that choice means you're not considering me. You don't care about me. You know, so at that point, why are we here? Right? That goes with ideas as well. Right? If ideas are being tested like that, it's good to, you know, pay attention to see what's the kind of response that you get. You may not get a literal response, but you're going to get an intuitive feeling. You're going to feel a response. Like when we felt, you know, when we had to break ties with practicing Christianity, we had to ask ourselves, is the God that we believe in and the God that's part of my life, is that God being represented in this idea or a series of ideas? And for me, the answer was no. And so we had to sever our tie with that. You know what I mean? And that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to let go because it's equivalent to severing ties with your mother, if you think about it. For me, you know, through my work, my theological work, we see the church, you know, very much like, you know, a mother. And this mother teaches you, shows you the ropes, nurtures you, cares for you, right? And, you know, the church plays that role as well, nurturing and caring for people spiritually, religiously, showing them the ropes, showing them the rituals, showing them how to pray, what to pray for, how to read the Bible, how to interpret the Bible, you know, how to have hope and all. So the church has played that mother role. And so for me, when we severed ties with that religiously mother archetype symbol, it was devastating, you know? And we can only empathize with other people who maybe have tried to sever ties with their mother or their religiously symbolic mother and find themselves going back because they can't even, you know, fathom that they can be who they are beyond that. You know, they get, like you said before, they get caught up in that fear and then they end up going back to the abuser, going back to the oppressor. Like, it's like in Exodus, it's like imagine the Jews going back to Egypt. You went through all that to escape and you just went back. You know, like when Moses comes back down in the story to find them, they melted gold, collectively put together gold to put together this golden calf that they used to worship in Egypt. Moses comes back and finds these people worshiping, doing things that they used to do. It's like, yo, what the fuck, man? I got these tablets here. You know, like I was hard at work trying to listen to the word of God, trying to get inspired, right? To help us move forward, to rebuild. And I came up with these 10 fucking rules. And you motherfuckers are here doing old Egyptian shit, slave shit. Y'all not slaves no more. I thought that was clear. You know what I'm saying? When we went through what we went through, that was a huge indicator. You are no longer captives. You're no longer slaves. Therefore, you shouldn't be acting like that. But that story is so beautiful, whether true or not, because it articulates how humans respond to this kind of pattern or situation. When we separate or sever ourselves from people or ideas or things that were not healthy for us, and we've been in that state for so long, like we've been conditioned, we can't imagine anything other than that. And the severing happens, it's traumatic as fuck. And if you don't have people around you that can help ground you and help show you, hey, it's okay. It's gonna be okay. It's not all over. If you don't got that kind of support system around you, then yes, you're gonna go back because it's gonna feel like you can't breathe. And if you're gasping for air, you're gonna go back to what was making you believe you were breathing or was providing air. And that is the captive, that is Egypt, that is the oppressor, that is, the religion, or that is that person who's been manipulative and is using you like a parasite or something. All these things we all deal with, and it's hard to sever from it is really what we're just trying to get across and articulate here, because people don't talk about it enough. This is the kind of stuff that people just like suppress inside themselves, and they deal with maybe like privately through drinking or drugs or late night watching television, or they're always on their phone or something. Like humans are very creative in that sense, where we will always find outlets. And if we're on this naked journey, let's be real. Like we have many different forms of outlets that are many forms of different addictions.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like no one is better than the next.
Yeah. It makes me think about how these things are just like physical stimulations.
Yeah.
Like everyone is seeking like this physical stimulation instead of trying to think critically about something or about themselves, their lives.
Or have a spiritual stimulation.
And then, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that's different.
Like a combination of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting how we've watched with our own eyes things like this happen. But it's like we also can't intervene. This is just part of life, the life experience, the cosmos, you can say. We cannot intervene. We can't control what's outside of us, if you think about it.
We can't heal people. We can't fix people or things. Yeah, you're right.
And so, but we tell ourselves, or maybe in the past, that this can fix it, or doing this will fix it. I'm going back to what once used to take care of me and things like that. But then you're like, oh, it's all right. Like I'll go through those things that I couldn't bear. I'll go through that. As long as I have some place to stay or something to that extent. We tell ourselves those stories, and we're sort of back to square one, because you can't go back to something thinking that you're just going to change the whole system if you're using like the same tools.
Yep.
So when you talk about the oppressor, you're just back in the plantation, like again, like this physical stimulation thing. You're not using your mind. You're not like spiritually being connected. You're out of this guilt or something, or that you owe someone or something your time, your presence, and that makes you go to sleep at night. But then in reality, we know that that's not true. And you then will continue to live with that shame because you know you're not being true to yourself.
Yeah.
You are not, I guess, at that point where you're allowing yourself to be brave and move away from those things that are portraying to look like they're helping you grow, or they're there to support your changes and things like that. But in reality, doesn't seem to be the case. But
Yeah. All right. I think that's a good stopping point. Before we conclude this episode, just want to remind you you're amazing. Thank you so much for taking this time to have this dialogue. For real.
same here. I'm always glad to share space with you, and we can just talk about these things.
Yeah, we're looking forward to trying to keep this up and keep this going. This energy right now feels amazing. Like, honestly, I feel like I've cried like a little baby and I just want to go down for a nap right now.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling of just releasing authenticity, releasing things as they are, accepting ourselves as we are. It feels good. It does.
Even if, I should say, having to deal with caring about what other people just think about you and how they might be seeing you as you are expressing like your innermost, deepest thoughts and things like that. But for anyone that is listening and can relate to these things, or they're in a place in their life where they are experiencing similar things, just know that you're not alone.
Definitely not. And that's hard to believe sometimes. Trust me. Some days we wake up and we look out and we say, where the hell are the other people like me?
Yeah.
And, but over time, we find one another. So hopefully we bump into like-minded people like ourselves out there in the real world. And yeah. See you in the next episode.
Bye, guys.